Well, folks, it was a tough night for Republicans tonight. A lot of reckoning that needs to be done with inside of the Republican Party, especially when it comes to the fact that we are the party of low propensity voters. We are the party of people who believe in the values that we espouse and that we represent. But they are not the people who are tuned into politics, who politics are a part of their everyday lives. And that is just the reality of the Republican Party right now. So, in the Wisconsin State Supreme Court election, Susan Crawford, the liberal candidate, won this race. Right now, there's about 91% of the vote in. She's leading by about 9 points. This is really not much different than what we saw in the 2023 Wisconsin Supreme Court race when I believe Janet Protaskowicz, I don't know how to say her name, won by roughly about 11 points. There's a lot of reckoning that needs to be done with inside of the Republican Party. Because the reality is that we need to be able to win in these off-cycle elections, the elections that are not in November, elections that are not when Donald Trump is not on the ballot. But so let's just start off, like I said, just taking a look where we are at right now in this election. Looks like it's closing the gap a tiny bit, but we know that Susan Crawford is going to win this. And you can see it's very clear up front why she's going to win this race. First, we're going to start by comparing and contrasting a couple things real quick. So here's the Wisconsin Supreme Court. Let's see. Some things to just look at. Look at Dane County. This is where Madison is. UW-Madison is there as well. Very, very liberal area. Crawford currently leading with about 96% of the vote in. Has 81% of the vote there. Kamala had in the 70s, 74, really 75%. So you can clearly see Crawford running ahead by about 7 points in one of the most liberal counties. And Wisconsin is no different than almost any other state. You have a big city or two where the Democrats are able to run the vote up, and it really has to do what does turnout look in the rural counties. Is there enough turnout to overcome the huge barrier set by the very liberal inner city counties? That's just the reality. But she's also running ahead in a lot of districts that Trump won in. Look at this. Steve Kornacki talked about this on MSNBC. Talking about this, I don't remember what the name of this he called, but it's really these counties starting with La Crosse County that kind of borders the Mississippi River right here. These are the counties that are going to matter. You can see right here, La Crosse County, Vernon County, Crawford County, Grant County, Lafayette County, Vernon County, Monroe County, Iowa County. Iowa County, not as much. That's part of kind of Dane County. It's kind of all grouped in together there. But you can see here, La Crosse County, 98% in. Crawford winning, has 62% of the vote in La Crosse County. La Crosse County here, we're looking at Kamala only won it by 54%. So you're seeing what? A 7-8 point increase here? Not good. Not good whatsoever. You're looking at places like Grant County. Trump won 58%. Here, Brad Schimmel only has 52% of the vote right now. Look at places like Crawford, 56% of the vote. In Crawford, Susan Crawford has 51% of the vote. So it's like you are seeing a complete flip of a couple of these districts here that President Trump won. That you now have Susan Crawford winning. She won. She's going to win Crawford County. She's going to win Vernon County, La Crosse County, Richland County, Sauk County. Trump won Sauk County. Trump won Richland County by a healthy margin. Come up here. Look at Brown County. Susan Crawford barely won Brown County. President Trump won Brown County by like 8 points not that long ago. Look at Kenosha. Susan Crawford, same thing. Racine and Kenosha. Racine, it's the same result here. And you're seeing right here, both of these, Kenosha and Racine, both going to Susan Crawford, the Liberal candidate here. There is a huge discrepancy between how our party was able to turn out in November versus now. Now, luckily, there is some good news that's coming out of this. On the other hand, there was a constitutional amendment that was on the ballot to add voter ID requirements to the state constitution, which passed overwhelmingly with 63%. Pretty big win for the Republican Party. You can show maybe the candidate that's backed by the Republicans is not leading, but you can clearly see that voters agree. They agree with President Trump. They want voter ID in their state. And it's funny, the one county that they voted no was Dane County. The People's Republic of Madison. And same thing with the superintendent's race here. You saw the incumbent continue. She is going to win this election here. No doubt about it. Won a lot of counties that President Trump had won before. It is just very, very sad to see this happening. But are we surprised? No. I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm insanely surprised by this. I had a video earlier that I think I said between 2 to 4% Crawford was going to win by. Obviously, I was wrong on the percentage. I definitely thought it would be closer. It looked like initial turnouts in like Brown County. It looked like initial turnout was going to be higher, and turnout is going to be higher in this election versus the 2023 Supreme Court race. No doubt. But I really expected more out of this race for the Republican Party. And there's a lot of things that the GOP, structural issues that the GOP has. The GOP can turn out, when it's a turnout game, the GOP is going to win because especially when they're targeting these low propensity voters. But there was a lot, there was a great post, and I wonder if I still have it up on, oh gosh, I forget who had put it up. It was, I believe it was Virginia Project. Let's see if he has it up still here. Here you go. This kind of sums it up what I'm thinking. If you wanted to win that Wisconsin Supreme Court election, you needed to have taken my advice 2 years ago to build up the Wisconsin GOP's operational capacity to be on par with its Democrat counterparts. A last-minute frenzy might work, but boy, do those odds suck. I completely agree. Completely agree. We do not have the operational capacity that the Democrats have nationwide. The organizational structure, the resource, the proper allocation of resources as well, the ability to mobilize voters in these off-season elections, off-cycle elections, and to be able to adapt, to be efficient, to have strategic planning that goes into this. There needs to be an ability to coordinate across an entire state with local precincts, all the way up to the state level. There needs to be party leaders in each district or precincts that is on the ground ensuring voter turnout. And for the Wisconsin GOP, this means having a well-structured network to manage, let's say, volunteers, staff members, and local leaders. They need to have proper funding for staff, technology, and these campaigns. These campaigns need to be meticulously planned out years in advance. There needs to be enough money for advertising, not a last-minute push. This needs to be a structural, we need to go at this a year in advance, 2 years in advance, to have proper voter outreach, to be able to train staff members and volunteers to manage these efforts. There needs to be an actual business side to it. The Trump campaign in 2024 was much more structurally well-run. We need to have many well-oiled machines in different states. That's what you need to have state-level machines that can run. You need small little engines that are running with inside the bigger engine of the United States, the Republican Party in the United States. Because it is very true. This is the Trump Party, not the Republican Party anymore. People turn out for Trump in this party. They do not turn out for Brian Schimmel or whatever the hell his name is, because he's going to be a nobody after this. Brad Schimmel. Republicans are not going to turn out for him in the droves that they turned out for President Trump. Especially when you're facing a party of Democrats that has high propensity voters in it, voters who are engaged. Politics are a part of their lifeblood. That's just the reality of the situation. There's a lot of different mixes here, and this should be a plan. This should show that Republicans for 2028, Donald Trump is not going to be on the ballot in 2028. I know Trump wants to tease and troll the libs, saying that he might run. I've got my own thoughts on that, and we don't have to go into that here because that's not the purpose of this video. But the reality is that Donald Trump is not going to be on the ballot in 2028. Republicans need to find a way to win without Trump on the ballot. There needs to be overall support for the Republican machine. It is not about the top of the ticket. You are only as strong as your weakest link. We have some very weak links we can see. How are we mobilizing voters? We need to be able to identify and turn these voters out. Having proper data management, a good ground operation, whether it's door-to-door canvassing, whether it's phone banking, get out the vote efforts. These tactics, if used properly, can offer rewards to secure votes. And including, we also need to adapt in the modern age, targeted ads. Proper transportation to polling stations. How did Trump win in 2024? A big part of it was that early vote. Maybe not mail-in ballots, but go into your precinct, your polling place, and vote in early. Because sometimes it's hard to everybody on one day mobilize your entire base to vote on one day. You need to bank as much of that as you can when early voting starts. So this is going to require, not in just Wisconsin, this should be a warning to Republican parties across the country. There needs to be long-term preparations. They need to have a pipeline built out. Oops. There needs to be a pipeline that is built out. This needs to be built out years in advance at this point. Whether it's a pipeline of candidates, proper training for campaigns, their staff, the volunteers, proper messaging that is going to resonate with voters. Like this guy said, this Virginia project, you needed to start thinking about this 2 years ago. You really did. And for anybody running in 26 and 28, they really need to be thinking about that. State level races. You're only as, Donald Trump, you even saw in 2024. Look in 2024. In the presidential race versus, let's even just say, they're not going to. Here we go. Look at this. This was the presidential, the map. On the presidential level, even one link down, not even, 5 or 6 links down at the state Supreme Court race. You see that Donald Trump was not able to carry everyone over the edge. Donald Trump won Arizona. Ruben Gallego still won. You could, I think you can put a lot of that on the fact that Kari Lake was the candidate. So good candidate quality. Having a pipeline of candidates, not running the lady who is not going to win in the state. She's just not going to. We've had other videos where we cover that. She's just not going to win. Jackie Rosen, the incumbent, somehow snuck by about 25,000 votes at the same time when President Trump won the state by 46,000 votes. Tammy Baldwin was able to pull it out in Wisconsin. Alyssa Slotkin was able to pull it out in Michigan, both states that were won by President Trump. It's like, so even at the next link down, they're struggling. There needs to be a state. There needs to be a state machine. It cannot just be a top-down approach where we get weaker every link down we go. We need to build this from the ground up where we are strong at the county and the precinct level. That is what we need. It's like, look at this. It's like even the Democrats, even who won in Wisconsin in 2024, they're still not winning. Eric Hovde still is winning Vernon County, Crawford County, Grant County, Lafayette County, Richland County, still winning Brown County. Look at this. Eau Claire, keeping the margin tight in Eau Claire, keeping the margin tighter in La Crosse, keeping the margin tight in Dane County, Rock County, Greene County, Iowa. It's like there needs to be a better infrastructure from the ground up. And this was a high stakes race that, it is going to cement for right now, the court's ideological balance. It is going to be a liberal held state, and we are now our Supreme Court, and we are going to have to deal with the consequences of that. That is just the reality of the situation that we're in right now. But like I said, there were still some positives here when it came to voter ID, actual policies that the Republican Party supports. Now, there were some other elections that also occurred. So the first election that occurred was House District 1. This was to replace Matt Gaetz. Obviously, he was Trump's AG nominee, eventually withdrew, decided not to go back to Congress. He had been in Congress for quite a long time at that point, and also was a state representative or senator, I believe. But this also needs, it's like, even in, this is the thing. I'm not going to take these margins too literal. Obviously, the Democrat won in Wisconsin, and the Republicans won in these two House districts in Florida. Don't get me wrong. They won, and I don't think we should be looking too much at the margin. I think it is safe to recognize the margin where we're at. You want to look at, these are the House races in 2024. Matt Gaetz won this race by 32 points. I wonder if we can pull up. Oh, they don't do it by congressional district on here. Yeah, they don't do it by congressional district, but that's okay. But still, this is a race, and let's see, actually, we can look. Florida Congressional District 1. This state, Congressional District 1 voted for Trump by, excuse me, beep. By 37 points? It's like, you've got to be kidding me. 37 points. It voted for Donald Trump by, and even in the Senate, it voted for Trump by voted for Rick Scott by an even larger margin, which is kind of wild to even say. But ultimately, like we said, it's the same thing with the Wisconsin Supreme Court race. Democrats are higher propensity voters. Even when you have a strong Republican machine in a state, you are still seeing that having low propensity voters in your party is hurting your party. And not hurting your party, but it's hurting them in these off-cycle elections. We obviously want to win these elections. But, and we'd like to win it by healthier margins. But ultimately, Jimmy, they were able to hold both of these seats. They both were held by roughly about 14 points, it looks like. Each one of them. And of course, Florida Congressional District 6 had to do with Mike Waltz. I also believe that this is the seat that Ron DeSantis held. Let's see. Yep, Randy Fine. Yeah, let's see. It voted for Trump by 30 points. Voted for Scott by about 28 points. Voted for DeSantis by 68 points. It's like, this is some good stuff here. Some really, really good stuff. But it's like, yeah, and Ron DeSantis held this seat until 2018, resigned. Not going to look at the margin. Obviously, these were two pretty big wins. The GOP needed this in the House. You're looking at some bills that could be potentially defeated or pulled off the House floor by, you have Thomas Massie as a reliable no vote. You needed to pick up these two House seats. And you even look what Trump did with his nominee for UN ambassador. It's like Trump had to pull her. He had to pull Elise Stefanik. She's a very solid Republican. But you couldn't take the risk. You couldn't take the risk. And we talked about this before. We talked about this when Trump was nominated and so many people from the House. This could hurt you. This is going to hurt your already very small margin that you had. But here we are. It just is what it is. We still were able to win these seats here. And in Wisconsin, they were able to pass voter ID. So I think there's a lot the Republican Party needs to say, hey, look, we still won 2 of these seats that we needed to win. We lost a Supreme Court race that, honestly, I'm not going to say we should have won, but I think it should have at least been closer. And they need to recognize that there are structural concerns. Just having infrastructure from the top down. It's like building a skyscraper and having the strongest part of the infrastructure at the top and not the base. Yes, there are many reasons why you need strong infrastructure on floor 100 through 150. Absolutely. There's you want to talk about engineering of a building. There's wind that you need to account for. You need to make sure that this is sturdy. But if you don't have a good base that's holding it down, a good foundation, the whole thing, it doesn't matter how good your infrastructure is at the top, how well thought out, how well designed it is, how well it was actually made. You are going to have issues if you do not have a strong foundation that's holding that building up. That's just the reality of the situation, no matter how great it is at the top. Because ultimately, the infrastructure at the top only comes into play once every 4 to 2 years. It's like it's not even at the top. Floors 150 only come into play every 4 years in the presidential election. The infrastructure on floors 70 to 100 come in every 2 years at the House and the Senate races. But that bottom 70 floors, that really, really matters. Imagine the top 70, floor 70 to 150 is made out of steel and aluminum and, strong building material. But the bottom is made out of wood. Maybe it's a halfway decent infrastructure, but if that infrastructure is compromised on the bottom, the whole thing comes falling, especially when the infrastructure that doesn't matter is the infrastructure at the top. Because ultimately, the people who have so much more control and say over your day-to-day lives, the actual governments that have more to do with your day-to-day lives are these state governments, your state Supreme Court, your state circuit courts, your governor, your House of Representatives, your state legislator, your city council members. Those are the people that actually matter. They have much more say, and that's what we want. As conservatives, we want the city council in the state, in the county, to have so much more say over your lives than the federal government does. It needs to be tailored district by district. The more uniform a community is, the more agreement there is, the more... I don't want to say unanimous consent, but the more of that you have in a small area, I agree with that. If a school district or even a city decides that all schools in the city or in that county they vote for school lunches to be paid for by the county, free lunches, and we're going to use tax dollars revenue to pay for it. Great. But do we need a one-size-fits-all policy coming from the governor's office or from the president? I don't think so. But so if conservatives really want the government that we aspire to have, where local governments have much more control over our day-to-day lives than the federal government, which is already true right now, but we want to give them more, if that's really what they want, then they need to be prepared to win elections and govern and to have a strong electorate in those races. Because if you have a strong electorate for presidential races, but you delegate all the power to your city council members, to your counties, to your school boards, to your state and local representatives, but you don't have the infrastructure to actually win or the electorate that will turn out for those people, well, then it doesn't matter. We still want a smaller federal government, but we're not going to get anything done if we do not have that infrastructure at smaller levels, at that lower level. I don't know how much we can stress this. Donald Trump is not going to be on the ballot in 2028. He's not going to be in the ballot in 2025, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32. He's not going to be on the ballot. He may be able to campaign. He may be able to do teleconferences, virtual town halls. He can do all of that. But unfortunately, when his name is not on the ballot, there is a large portion of the Republican Party that does not turn out. That's just the reality of the world we live in here. And, Democrats are, and this is the thing, Democrats are going to run with this and say it's a complete repudiation of the Republican Party in what they're trying to do. No, it's not. It shows the lack of infrastructure that the Republican Party has on state levels. I agree with that. I don't think it is a rubber stamp that the Trump administration has just been stopped in its tracks. I don't buy that for a second. Because look, at the end of the day, look at the actual policies that are being supported. This is a huge Republican policy right here. That overwhelmingly won. If you want to go policy by policy, the Republicans are leading. They are going to win. But when it has to do with actual nominees, actual candidates for government that are not Donald Trump, they struggle. And Charlie Kirk had a very good, he summed it up very well. We did a lot in Wisconsin, but we fell short. We must realize and appreciate that we are the low propensity party now. The party has been remade. Special elections and off-cycle elections will continue to be a problem without a change of strategy. We are the party of welders, waiters, and plumbers. We are the party of people who work with their hands, who shower before and after work. Politics is an afterthought for many of our supporters. They have common sense and American values, but they are voters who must be chased. Democrats have become the college-indoctrinated, institutionalized, and government-dependent high-propensity party. They live for politics. It is their region. 100%. That is exactly it. Democrats are the party of college-educated voters, of people who make more than $100,000 a year. That is the party, the elite, the wealthy, the well-educated, by the standards that are set by the university. That is the party. These are the people who are a part of the administrative state. These are the people who live for politics, who are very tuned into politics. But continuing on, you may hate Donald Trump, but he resurrected a dead GOP back to life. Voters who weren't on anyone's data rolls came out of the woodworks to vote for Donald Trump. Our movement must begin to fully fund the infrastructure to match the Democrat machine. Our ideas are better. 100%. That is exactly it. The ideas are better, and they're actually popular. But we need to match like for like. We need to out-organize Democrats. We need to match their fundraising advantage. Let Wisconsin be a wake-up call. Let it be a call to return to the front lines. We won in November, but to save the Republicans, we must string together multiple victories, and that starts in 2026. 100% agree. 100% agree. And this is it. You should have been doing a lot more a long time ago. And, people are going to claim election fraud. Just shut the hell up, to be honest with you. Just shut the hell up. I'm not about that. Not about that one bit. So that is my take on the election results tonight. That's going to wrap things up for today, folks. We will catch you next time. Don't forget to drop down below, hit that subscribe button. We will catch you next time.